Hello and welcome to another edition of the Willy-Nilly Show. Friends, before we discuss important global events with Moscow-based senior journalist Mr. Fred Ware, I would like to request you to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Mr. Ware, welcome back and good morning.
Hi, how are you? It's actually
Pretty good.
evening here in Moscow, so just say good day. That works.
You're pretty much dressed like an Irishman today.
Am I? Well, no. There's a lot of green in the picture. I get that. It's random. It's completely random. I assure you.
You're celebrating the St. Patrick's Day in advance, it seems.
Maybe. Okay. I do celebrate St. Patrick's Day every day in my fashion.
Okay. So, Mr. Ware, if I were to ask you whether the Russia-Ukraine war was all about the control of the Arctic, would you agree? Because most of the geopolitical experts, they write about that. And also, some time back you might have heard, I think it's Republican Senator Mitch McConnell, he even said on a television show that this war is about the Arctic, the riches that are there, to the tune of almost $50 trillion. I think it's more than $50 trillion. It's even more than the $100 trillion. You even wrote an article on January 5th. I read it. With the ice thawing in the Arctic, Russia is looking for partners, in the West. So tell me about it.
Yes, I did write about that. I wouldn't say that it's just about the Arctic, but there is a new era of big power competition beginning. It is after, it was in the past, perhaps concealed a little bit under all the rhetoric of liberal, rules-based world order, et cetera, which all very well. But the naked pursuit of economic and geopolitical advantage was always there under the surface. Now, with Donald Trump being as blunt as he is, and simplistic, by the way, he makes it clear that it's all about the rare earths and the oil. It never was just about those things, but they always has been a factor. And markets and opening economies to capital and all that is part of the competition between big powers and has been for centuries. So the Arctic is a new arena. It's not a brand new arena, but with global warming opening it up more and more every year, the ice sheets are receding, and that opens the possibility of many things: resource extraction, exploration and extraction, fisheries, brand new fisheries, transport routes, and Russia has got the jump on everybody in most of those respects. And of course, military competition, which is just beginning to accelerate in that region. So it's part of a much bigger unfolding global competition, but it's an important new arena for sure.
Okay, so, but before the start of the Russia-Ukraine war in February of 2022, there were pictures which emerged of the Finnish army training for the Arctic War. So if Arctic is not so important, not the only important thing, then why were these pictures emerging, and why was even Russia, boasting about the fact that they have got almost 48 ice cutters and they're prepared for, extracting the riches in the Arctic and controlling that area. And of course, when you look at the Russian landmass, almost around 50% of Russia is in the Arctic.
We don't need to argue over this. It's not the only or even the main factor. The competition between Russia and the U.S. and the Soviet Union before it has been going on for a long time. and it's over many, many things. The Arctic is emerging as an important new theater where this competition is unfolding. There's no, I mean, so, but yes, it is creating new possibilities. And I think I related in my article that the possibilities are not just for competition and possibly war, but also for cooperation.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, the Arctic is international territory. It's supposed to be belong to nobody but the UN, and therefore should be open on principle to all countries to take part in developing it. Um, all the main Arctic countries, Russia, Canada, um, Denmark, I think.
Greenland.
Let's
Greenland.
just, yeah, okay, because of Greenland,
Yeah.
Denmark is an Arctic power. But I'm just thinking of all those who have launched cases with the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention to extend their territorial influence um, well into the Arctic. Russia was right off the mark on this 20 years ago. They started, they launched a legal challenge to bring the entire Siberia, whatever it's called the Lomonosov Shelf, I believe, all extending from Siberia all the way to the North Pole. That should all become part of Russia's economic zone of influence. Now, the Law of the Sea Convention hasn't ruled on any of this yet, but other countries, Canada is right in there, are asking for the same thing to extend their own Arctic shelf out, uh, presumably as far as the North Pole, and therefore would close everybody else out. It would make those countries, those 8 Arctic countries, the lords of the Arctic, and other countries would be, whatever bonanza is waiting there, they would be shut out. So let's wait and see. It may not even happen for many years. Meanwhile, the competition is heating up and becoming more fierce, and also the military tensions are growing. But yes, to your point, the Arctic is extremely important and it's going to be a growing factor in whatever happens in the next years and decades.
Yeah, you're right. Mr. Putin has, always expressed this here and there in various forums and even in his bilateral talks that he wants partnership not only with the West, but some countries like India and Asia. He's already spoken to Modi about it. That let's come do things in Arctic together, and even Mr. Donald Trump. So I don't know why America is so hostile towards Russia when they're inviting them to do good things in the Arctic together. And I want your views on what's happening in Greenland. First, Mr. Trump said he will annex Greenland from Denmark, and then when they protested, I mean, he went to that conference. I don't know. Oh yeah, World Economic Forum. And after that, he changed his stance. He said, if we will not be sending our forces to Greenland, and if Greenland wants to be a part of US, they're more than welcome. And it's interesting that Donald Trump wanted to annex it because if he would have asked Denmark, because it's a NATO ally and an EU ally of America, they've already provided them whatever they wanted in Greenland, and plus even the warm water port in the capital, Nuuk. So, what do you think about that, sir?
Well, Donald Trump is a special piece of work, and his idea of America first, America's role in the world, is a very old-fashioned one. Um, let's call it imperialism, just because that's the most appropriate term for it. But America grew in the 19th century, grew into a world power through expansion. It bought territories, Louisiana, Alaska, purchased them from European powers. It also conquered vast territories, almost 50% of Mexico was annexed to the United States after the U.S.-Mexican War in 1846. I'm I'm banging over old history, but there was a model of imperialism by which America grew, prospered, and rose to world prominence, mostly in the 19th century and early 20th century, which Donald Trump is hearkening back to, because the post-World War II paradigm, and still, I would argue, a form of American imperialism, far more sophisticated model where it united like thinking countries, particularly we're talking about Canada, Australia, Europe, Western Europe, and later, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, much of Eastern Europe as well, brought them in as allies, nominal equals, uh, forms of consultation were created. It didn't look like old-fashioned imperialism, and in fact worked much better for American interests than the old model did. And this is what Donald Trump is jettisoning, jettisoning in whatever he sees as the advantages. Unlike what you would say in the new model which you were referring to, Denmark was an ally. It would have given the United States whatever it wanted in Greenland, military bases, access to minerals and rare earths and all that. Just had to ask. That seemed like a better way of going about it than assuming ownership, taking over the place and making it a state. That's a 19th century model of imperialism, which Donald Trump seems enamored of. I don't know. He has made some arguments that only American control over Greenland could secure it from Russia and China. I don't know. I would have thought NATO control over Greenland accomplished that just as well. But this is the era of Trump. We're living in the Trump times, so this is how he is going at it. But he backed off, and this is another thing that you have to bear in mind about Trump is that he comes on very strong, bombastic, makes all kinds of demands and claims and threats, and then he walks them back. So
Tackle. That's why it's called tackle. Trump
he's
always.
done that over and over and over again. So I don't know what he's accomplished with respect to Greenland, but what he is doing with all this roiling of the waters and even rhetorical changing of the paradigm is to lose the goodwill that did bind that post-World War II alliance, pro-American alliances together. You know, it wasn't true of most of the world. If you lived in the Middle East or Central Asia or Central America, you never had any illusions about the nature of American imperialism. Central Asia in particular was like the Soviet Union's Eastern Europe for the 20th century and never was treated as a like-minded ally or anything like that. Much of Latin America has different experience with the United States than Western Europe did, and Canada. And okay, so let's talk about Canada. You're I assume a proud Canadian.
Yeah.
Well, good. Yes, because it's a great.
Well, you have to.
Yeah, no, it's a great country, and I grew up in Canada, and it was always the case that yes, we're different. We have a whole list of ways that we differ from Americans, and when anybody asks us we have that listed, and we are a different politically, socially, economically, completely different country. But at least for the Anglophone Canadians, you can't help feeling very close to the United States. I grew up in Toronto, and when I was a lad, we had 6 TV stations. I know there are hundreds now. I've recently been in Toronto and looked at the range of entertainment and news and everything that you can get on a TV set, a smart TV these days. But when I was growing up, there were 6 stations, and that was it. 3 of them were from Buffalo, New York, CBS, ABC, and NBC, and 3 of them were in Canada, Toronto-based CBC, CTV, and I believe it was Global, and that was all. But half of it was American content, and I grew up watching all the same entertainment and news programs that any average American kid my age would have. And that's remarkable, very few countries, I guess maybe in Western Europe now, they have this experience where they're watching each other's intimate, TV was an intimate window on the society, as if you were one of them. But we had that as Canadians, and so we feel very close to Americans, and the bond was inseparable. The trading relationship, of course, the raw economic relationship was total dependency. But we felt good about it. This is my point. We joined all the American alliances. We didn't join some of their wars, like Vietnam or Iraq. We politely declined. But still, that seemed an unshakable bond. And now, as they say, I just spent 3 weeks in Canada, and I'm astounded at how alienated Canadians feel from the United States. People you never would have thought had any political emotions, much less geopolitical ones, say, I've stopped going there. I will not visit that place at least until Trump is gone. Like that is an intangible thing, that goodwill, that fellow feeling that Canadians had with the United States has started to evaporate. And the same has happened to Europeans whose post-war experience with America was overwhelmingly positive. Yes, they joined alliances that were American dominated. They accepted trade arrangements that were American authored, but they felt good about it. They felt they were doing the right thing. They were on the right side of history, and the American alliance was their thing.
Yeah.
Now, increasingly, they don't. And Trump has wrecked that, and that will come back to haunt for a long time to come. However this new model of American imperialism works, and let's face it, does work. Raw might has its sorry guys, but rules-based orders aside, force rules the world and always has. So Trump can get what he wants, and he's demonstrating this. I'll just finish it. He's demonstrating how powerful the position of the United States is in the world. No matter how much we talk about how it's diminished and it's a multipolar world now, the United States still has primacy.
Yeah, and he keeps contradicting himself. In one of the press conferences at White House, like a month ago, he said, unlike the other presidents, I've started practicing Monroe Doctrine again. But if he's practicing that, then he can't be going to Greenland and talking about annexation, because Monroe Doctrine was not about annexation. It was about we being the policemen of the Western Hemisphere. We won't come to the Western side, to the European side. You be there, we'll be here, and that's it. But he himself keeps contradicting himself, so that's rather funny.
Well, in this model of imperialism, annexation or purchase, because he does talk about purchase, is acceptable. And it's about control. The thing that, since I'm sitting in Moscow, the thing that the Russians are glomming onto, and this is another intangible consequence of what Trump is doing and saying, and all the banging of drums and smashing of paradigms that he is engaging in, is the Russians are in the room watching and listening. And if, they're saying if Trump has some kind of sovereign control over the Western Hemisphere, and he can tell Greenland what to do, and Venezuela, and Cuba, okay, well, why are you all saying that we've got no, strategic rights in Ukraine? Right? Obviously, we have the right to make keep these small nations of the former Soviet space within our sphere of influence. Duh. And so Trump has changed the conversation very much in Russia's favor, and that too is going to have consequences down the road. And China's favor as well, I might add, because China has that, what is it called, the 11-dash claim on the South China Sea. They have claims on Taiwan, and there too, the change in the model where suggests that it's okay to use military force and economic might to bring these, reluctant areas under full control.
This is what I want to discuss with you next. Moving on to Venezuela. So, the Venezuela thing happened when the President Maduro was kidnapped along with the First Lady. I'll use the word kidnapped. So, but one interesting thing that emerged out was that they maintained kind of silence, Russia and China, apart from mere lip service. They didn't say anything. I mean, Russia didn't send its naval warships there. Nothing happened. So is it some kind of a tacit understanding between the world powers that, America will be happy in the Western Hemisphere and will take control of Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Eurasia?
No, there is no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that Russia and China didn't interfere because they wouldn't stand a chance in the Western, confronting the United States in the Western Hemisphere. The last time anybody tried, the Khrushchev deployed nuclear missiles in Cuba in 1962. We all know how that turned out, but it turned out okay for Cuba and also for the Soviet Union. They actually did a deal with a rational Kennedy administration, but confronting the United States in the Western Hemisphere would be an insane idea, and I don't think anybody in Moscow ever considered it. It's a different story maybe in Iran, which is now, if you move from the Western Hemisphere into Asia, which is more Russia's country. There is a crisis in Iran, and Trump is ramping up military threats whilst engaging in negotiations. There are famous Trumpian tactics at play right now, the bombastic threats, the talks, and then maybe some walking back would take place. Let's hope. But there, Russia has more strategic interests. Iran has become part of the broader Russian multipolar strategy. It's not just like an economic ally. Trade between Russia and Iran has skyrocketed. But as a transport corridor, Russia is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in railroads in Iran in order to facilitate the construction of this, what's called the North-South Transport Corridor, North-South, which would go from the Indian Ocean Iranian ports on the Indian Ocean by rail
Yeah.
up through Azerbaijan to connect with the very
Java.
extensive Russian rail network, which fans out east and west. This is less important at the moment when there's virtually no connection between Russia and East and Western Europe. Since the war began, the potential of Russia to act as a transport intermediary between South Asia and Western Europe is diminished. But if we might hope for peace in Ukraine, a lot hinges on this and what kind of a peace it would be. Sanctions come off Russia, and Western Europe is already showing signs of really wanting back into the Russian market, and also to, in some decent way, regain access to Russian raw materials and energy. And this is, these are just voices under the surface in Europe at the moment, because the unified voice on the surface says, never, we're not doing business with Russia, they are dead to us, etc., etc. But that I have the feeling that would change quickly.
That's what I was about to say, because
Yeah.
you broached
That
upon that subject.
would
So,
change if broke out.
and in the peace treaty, which is about to be signed, or I don't know when it's going to be signed between Ukraine and Russia, now they're not involving the Europeans. If you have noticed, it's trilateral talks: Russia, America, and Ukraine. That's it.
Because the Europeans have made themselves irrelevant. I mean, they say, and rightly so, that they should have a voice and they should have a place at the table. But they haven't, partly, I think it's partly because of the particular group of politicians who are in charge of the European Union, who are like congenitally anti-Russian. Some of them, like Kaya Kallas, is almost a comic book figure in this respect. But it's partly because this particular group of politicians has painted themselves into a corner. I believe that's the English expression. They've painted themselves into this corner where we must have victory in Ukraine, or it's the end of the world. And you're also dealing with politicians who are in just terrible political trouble at home. Keir Starmer, I was reading his speech. The man is like beleaguered. His cabinet is evaporating, and he's probably boarded into his office in Downing Street with the political crisis all around him. The man made a speech at the Munich Security Conference today, Saturday, February the 14th. I think it was today. It was today. And he said, we're sending an aircraft carrier group. We have two. The British have two aircraft carrier groups, only one of which can take the sea at any one time, to Greenland to defend against Putin. He made such bellicose noises that only a politician who's absolutely desperate and has no domestic straws to cling to will practically go threatening World War III. Like that is such a transparent ploy that I can't make fun of it enough. But this is classic of a politician who's on his last legs and grasping at straws to survive. You talk about the Russian threat and say you're going to fight it. But Macron in France is in similar dire straits. He's taking a different tack. I must say, he is advocating renewed dialogue with Russia.
Yeah, that's
But
what I was about to say. Even Meloni,
Yeah, well, has been far more reasonable all along, but Macron swings both ways, and he's also shows all the earmarks of a politician in desperate trouble at home, and he is. So, and then there's Merz, who is presiding over a galloping economic crisis. Germany is in recession. Its industrial edge has evaporated, and largely because of the loss of cheap, reliable Russian energy.
Yeah.
And he's got no way out. So there too, you get these bellicose noises that make a guy look strong and determined and resolute. But in reality, the ground is collapsing under his feet. And new political forces are waiting in the wings in all three of those countries. I'm listing those countries because they are the three leaders of the coalition of the willing, the ones who want to fight to the last Ukrainian. That all three of them may well see a changing of the
Yeah.
political guard in coming months and years. And the forces that are waiting in the wings are probably going to be much more rational about Russia.
Yeah, even Switzerland, there was a Swiss plane which landed in Moscow like a couple of weeks ago, and they resumed dialogue with the Russians. Some Swiss politician was there.
Yes, I think everybody sees the end of the Ukraine war on the horizon. It can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. But what comes after that? And you just can't erase Russia from the map of Europe. And one thing that the Russians have demonstrated, and I know the Europeans hate this, but Russia has demonstrated that it has great economic resiliency, socially consolidated, and that Putin,
Great leadership.
well, political leadership is undisputed in Russia, and he's, there you can peruse the media and find all sorts of arguments, eloquent arguments that Putin has really fucked up. Can I say that on your podcast? Anyway, that Putin has made a strategic blunder after blunder and put Russia in a worse ever position. Then you can find articles saying the opposite. But the truth is that Russia has survived. It survived the most intense barrage of sanctions ever leveled against the country in all of history. Not only survived, but its economy keeps growing and changing and expanding. And the Russian army, although it has never been fighting full bore in Ukraine, this is something that has to be stressed. It's not like World War II. The Russians have not been going all out. They have not had a military mobilization since 2022. They're relying only on volunteers.
Syria.
I mean, they're well-paid volunteers, and people stress that they get the money. But still, they're volunteering to go to the front and fight, and enough of them every month to keep the ranks filled out. And the Russians are fighting in a low-key way. Their attitude is that I'm not privy to strategic thinking of Russians, but as far as I can deduce, their attitude is we just keep the pressure on month after month, and eventually Ukraine's going to collapse. And they're probably right about that. They're not in a hurry. That's my point. There's no deadline because Putin is under no pressure, not from domestic political forces, not by all appearances from any economic strain, and politically he seems secure in pursuing this strategy, and that's what has confounded the Trump administration, which keeps rushing to make a deal, is that Putin's willing to make a deal just on Russian terms. It's got to be the main war objectives that Russia has been fighting for have to be realized before he'll sign a peace deal. And so far, I hope that it's coming down to some point where everybody will find terms of agreement. But what is perfectly clear is that Putin is in no hurry whatsoever to
Yeah,
do that.
he's playing a game of patience, and I think the only obstacle in the peace talks happens to be Zelensky is adamant he doesn't want to, give Donbass region to Russia. And that's, I think, the only hurdle. And once that's sorted out, I think things can just fall into place. And what will happen to Zelensky once the peace plan happens? Should he not be in jail? Because I think he's the worst guy after Hitler. He has completely destroyed his country. So is he going to jail, or just going to enjoy the money that he has earned?
Well, I don't think Zelensky's the worst guy after Hitler. I covered his election campaign in Ukraine back in 2019. He ran on a very good program. Uh, he ran on the program of peace with Russia, among other things, fighting corruption. A lot of things which he has not delivered. Um, and as a wartime leader, he's been fairly effective. Um, and Ukraine was a democratic country, and though it has a powerful ultra right, mainly concentrated in the western oblasts of Ukraine, they never had massive public support. The fact is, and I say this as one who covered his election, uh, and really talked to a lot of Ukrainians at the time. Especially in eastern Ukraine, the big hope of people was that when Zelensky was elected, he would make peace with Russia. Uh, and the terms of peace there would, at that time, would have been much, much more lenient. In fact, the whole Donbass could have been integrated back into Ukraine. It was just people in eastern Ukraine, majorities of people speak Russian. I mean, they speak Russian as their first language. This is a fact. If that doesn't mean they're politically pro-Russian, but on the whole, 30 years of Ukrainian independence didn't give them reasons to feel strongly Ukrainian. Didn't give them that pro-Ukrainian identity. Didn't mean that they were pro-Russian. If anything, a lot of them, especially older people, still felt like they were Soviet people. And the one thing they wanted was that border that had appeared in 1991 to go away, or at least be reduced. For many years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people moved back and forth freely across the Russo-Ukrainian border. They have friends, business. They vacationed there. Uh, uh, I believe I found a statistic some years ago that at least half of all Ukrainians have relatives in Russia, and not quite the same number of Russians, but huge numbers of Russians have relatives in Ukraine. And they, I say this as a Canadian and a Ukrainian Canadian. I am a Ukrainian Canadian. Canada does not have the world's biggest Ukrainian diaspora. No matter what they say, it's Russia. Russia had almost 3 million Ukrainians, people of Ukrainian origin, ethnicity, living within it before 2014, and waves of war refugees have bumped it up to 5 or 6 million. That's far more. I think Canada has no more than 2 million Ukrainian people of Ukrainian descent. So, suck it, Canada. But this also is a powerful thing. I'm speaking as someone who argued before the war that there couldn't possibly be a war between these two countries because of all these links, these deep ties, even blood connections. But I was wrong about that. It's war. It's an awful war, and but I do believe that after it, provided the peace takes, an active form, that is economic development, social reconciliation, and so on, I do believe these ties will reassert themselves.
There are two very important things we're talking about Europe. There are two important things which I wanted to talk to you about. Now, ever since the Greenland thing, done by Mr. Trump, there has been kind of an animosity between the Europeans and the Americans, and sort of divorce has happened. And so, how significant do you think this deal is between European Union and India, this free trade agreement? Is it a sign of multipolarity? What does it signify?
Well, in Europe's case, it signifies desperation, but in Canada's case, it does signify, because Carney went to China, and he's also restoring ties with India. It does reflect a post-Trump strategy. I mean, Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, spelled that out in his speech in Davos when he pointed out that the rules-based world order is finished, and he noted it never was really what we thought it was, never worked to the in an equal or even-handed way, but whatever it was, we Canadians accepted it because it was good for us, but it no longer is working, and we have to accept that. I think I'm summarizing what he said pretty clearly, and that's a huge departure for Canada. That's a whole new tone of voice, and it's clear that Carney and his cabinet have been thinking about this for some time. So making new trade arrangements with other countries, China, India, and I think that the list will expand. This is just common sense for Canada. Have to diversify away from that dependency we have with the United States, and we'll always have it, but you can diversify away from it and get new partners, and not only make the political statement that you want to make, because we're our own country, but also get more reliable economic, safeguards. And I would argue, and it's too soon for me to go around arguing this, but that Russia, in the future after peace in Ukraine, will be another major center of world power that countries like Canada should come to and sign deals with, to diversify the world economy, and also just increase the independence, sovereignty of all the countries involved. Because for a country like Canada, and most of Mr. Carney's speech was devoted to this, Canada is a middle power, as they put it, and it can't throw its weight around all by itself the way big countries can. So it needs to find new associations, like-minded countries that share its, not just some of its values and conditions, but also share its size, so that they can band together to counteract the big powers, because we are, I think I just said this before, but we are entering an era when great powers and great power competition dominates the world stage.
Yeah, and there's another interesting thing that's been happening for the last 1 month. Trump keeps saying, "Oh, India is going to stop buying Russian oil," and Russians started panicking. So Mr. Peskov, who's the Kremlin spokesperson, he said, "We haven't heard from India. We haven't heard from India." But he keeps saying that, and India has not said anything to that sort. Maybe they will just, buy a bit less and diversify and go to Venezuela, because that oil has to be sold. So I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, India has to find its own way. And one hard fact is that India is far more reliant on its relationship with the United States than it is with its relationship with Russia. So if forced to choose, I mean, just look at the numbers. I don't need to bore you with them, but and India had, because I have long associations with India, and I know a lot of Indian people, have friends whom I talk with often. it's not just economic concerns. It is that India is a growing um, secular country, English speaking, at least its educated part of it, of India is English, freely English speaking, and that's in itself a huge number of people. What is the Indian middle class now? 600 million. Well, that's a giant country in itself, and tend to orient on the West, especially the United States. Have huge Indian diasporas in North America, as you yourself are a representative of, and these are important factors for India. But on the other hand, Trump, if he had asked nicely, if the Americans had used um, various soft power methods of persuasion, they might have got India to stop buying Russian oil. But Trump, in his blunt and threatening way, really has alienated Indians as well. I've found this, I appear on various Indian talk shows sometimes, and I'm just amazed at the change of tone on the part of presenters, Indian media personalities with whom I interact. Because in the early stages of the Russia-Ukraine war, despite all of its traditional ties to Russia, the Indian educated elite, at least represented by the people I was talking with, were very sympathetic to Ukraine and had no
Yeah,
support for Russia, Russian war, and it's
that was
against all of India's foreign policy principles what Russia is doing. So it's not that has changed. It's not that Indians have become pro Russia or Ukraine war, as that Trump has reminded them that it's a hard world, and you have a few old, reliable friends, Russia being time tested, friend and not ally, but more than just a friend to India, supplier of arms, and good arms. In the recent Pakistan-India war, I've heard Indian generals praising Russian air defense weaponry for
yeah,
the S-400 missile for its performance.
yeah.
So we're talking about things that India gets from Russia that it can't really get from the United States. Or one of the problems is that if you buy advanced American weaponry, it comes with so many strings attached. The Americans demand political control when they sell these weapons. For instance, if you just as an aside, if you look at the interplay between the United States and Turkey over its buying of the S-400 missile, the Americans cut them out of the F-35 program and won't let them back in unless they get rid of the S-400 missiles. I know I'm being rather specific, but this is an American attitude about their arms. They demand political allegiance comes with their weapons. Whereas the Russians not only sell their latest weaponry to India, but they allow joint projects. They allow, because India is big on making stuff in India and getting the technology transfer and all that. The Russians are far more amenable to that. So yes, I don't know about the oil purchases. There's a lot of ambiguity about that. My guess, but my guess is the Indo-Russian relationship is still solid, and the Indians will navigate with Trump, bearing in mind how important the United States is to India. Still, India is a proud country, doesn't like to be threatened and intimidated. But about the oil, here I'm just speculating that Russia will offer deeper discounts to the Indians to keep them buying Russian oil, and that by hook or by crook, the Indians will continue buying it.
Makes sense also because India has the technology to refine the kind of crude that comes from Russia, which is heavy sour, like Venezuela. Not many countries, only China and India, I think, has, and to some extent Russia, obviously, and America. So yeah, that's there. Now, moving on to I think your latest. I have not read your article which you posted yesterday on Start, but that's very fascinating because I read something written by Medvedev on Twitter, which I'm going to share with you. You might have already read it. So, can you see it?
Well, I can't, but I can tell you what he said. He's if you put it up, he
Yeah. So he's basically concerned about the fact that America is not wanting to, what do you call, renegotiate for the start because they want to pretty much scrap it because they want to do the nuclear testing again, and they're concerned about the tactical advantage, nuclear advantage that the Russians have and that the Chinese have. So you're right, you've already seen that. So I'm going to just
but,
stop sharing it.
what Medvedev said that was controversial and a little bit against the official line in Moscow was that no new treaty would be better than one that is negotiated in an atmosphere of mistrust. So he was pointing to the basic problems that have led to the demise of arms control, which is geopolitical rivalries are growing. Uh, Things like the war in Ukraine have just ended any kind of goodwill or trust that existed between Russia and especially the United States. And everything now depends on finding a new paradigm. And for the Russians, although the official line in Moscow is we want to revive START, we would like to extend its provisions for a year because there are a lot of good reasons why. Um, um, but the main reasons why, a little bit of, in my view, unlike Medvedev, I believe a little bit of arms control is better than none, is because it does limit nuclear weapons. It's a fact that since 1986, the nuclear arsenals, that is the stockpiles of nuclear warheads of the two big powers, the United States and Russia, have been reduced from over 80,000 to around 12,000 warheads. That is impressive. That it's not just about the numbers. It means that negotiations work, that the physical danger, just the massive presence of all those weapons, and the danger they create has been severely reduced for the benefit of humanity, and channels of communication, consultation, verification, all those things were created, which now are at risk of being destroyed, but or just lapsing in the absence of arms control. So I think the Russians are right to wish that we could get back to that, even if it's just extending the old treaty for another year and then seeing what happens. But the Russians, for 20 years now, have had a plan B, which ever since George W. Bush got out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2001, he just withdrew unilaterally from it. The handwriting on the wall was on the wall for the Russians that the Americans are going to use their technological superiority, their undoubted abilities, capacities, to try to create impenetrable missile defense shield for the United States and maybe its allies, which would, it would open up the possibility that the United States could launch a nuclear first strike against eliminating its nuclear missiles, its intercontinental missiles, and then warding off any retaliatory strike by submarine-based missiles or whatever. I hope I'm not being too details, but you see, this fear in Russia has been there in Russia ever since Ronald Reagan announced his Strategic Defense Initiative, which we all call Star Wars. But it increasingly, with technology and artificial intelligence coming into the picture, it really looks possible. And so the Russians have been betting on a group of weapons that they've created, which are completely unorthodox, exotic types of weapons. One is an underwater torpedo called the Poseidon, which uses this Russian Shkval technology, which makes the missile very fast underwater, like 200 kilometers per hour, and gives it long range. So such a weapon with a nuclear warhead could devastate port cities. In the United States, it could create massive tsunamis. It could wipe out aircraft carrier groups. And it wouldn't be possible for anti-missile defense to take it out. It's the Russians claim it's undetectable. So another one is a hypersonic missile, this Buravestnik.
Buravestnik.
Buravestnik is a different one. I'll get to it in a minute.
That one. Oreshnik
missile, which is hypersonic. It goes at 10 times the speed of sound, and the Russians have already tested it without warheads in Ukraine, and it proves to be very accurate and destructive. But the Russians claim, again, I don't know, I'm not an engineer or a military expert, but the Russians claim that it could outwit any existing missile defense or even one that's foreseeable. Because not only does it go at these high speeds, but it maneuvers, it changes direction.
It got six warheads which go in different
directions.
Warheads.
So they used to say that missile defense was like hitting a bullet in midair with another bullet, which is difficult enough to wrap your mind around. But if that first bullet is maneuvering, going left and right, and then upside, turning, corkscrewing, that makes it 100 times more difficult to hit. So this is another weapon the Russians have online. They're already using it. Whether they have workable nuclear warheads for it yet or not is in question. And the third big one is the Buravestnik, which is a nuclear-powered cruise missile. It uses a mini nuclear reactor to power this cruise missile, which gives it unlimited range. It means that instead of flying straight to a target, the way conventional cruise missiles do, and they have, say 1,000-kilometer range, it could fly to the South Pole, over the pole, around, across the Pacific Ocean, and then hit San Francisco from a completely unexpected direction. So these weapons are Russia's plan B, which would preserve its ability to launch a second strike, a devastating second strike, no matter how good Mr. Trump's Golden Dome gets to be. And so this is, but okay, these weapons are all coming online. They all clearly work. They change the strategic environment very radically.
But it makes sense, Mr. Ware, it makes sense to extend the New START for the simple reason that America doesn't have the money to do all the testing, nuclear testing, and build new weapons. So if they are starting the arms race, they better have money for that. And even Mr. Putin will not be interested in the arms race at this point in time because, he has to build up also.
Well, it's a muscle memory in Russia that the costs of the arms race contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union. They remember very well about how getting locked into that competition and accepting, endorsing, embracing this idea of parity with the United States really screwed them, because uh, you know, whatever the problems of the Soviet economy at its peak, at its arms race peak, they were spending up to 25% of GDP on military and military-related expenses. This is a horrible burden for a country to bear, and I think that part of the reason the Russians have developed these unorthodox, strange new weapons systems, which they believe are game changers, isn't to be threatening. They say this. I'm paraphrasing the Russians, that we're not trying to threaten the United States with destruction, but we need to be able to have our second strike capacity intact, and we don't want to spend too much money doing it. We're certainly not going to spend ourselves into bankruptcy as the Soviet Union did. So here are these weapons, and you should, to come around to your point, you should return to the path of arms control, negotiation, controlling the strategic environment through discussions, consultations, verifiable treaties, and then we can have strategic stability in the world, because the path of unlimited arms race, although it worked for the United States once, undeniably did work, that among other things, that strategic superiority that they were able to assert helped contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the American moment in the 1990s. The Russians are saying that's not coming back.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why Mr. Trump is hell bent on not extending the New START, because arms race in a multipolar world makes no sense. I don't know. And it's a known fact. We are moving towards multipolarity. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for today, Mr. Ware, and thanks for the time, and you get along with your family function.
Thank you very much, and send me a link when it's ready. I'd love to watch.
Yeah, and good luck with your function
Okay.
today.
All the best.
Yeah, same here. And friends, please like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.